Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Telosive EV live on YouTube. I hope you're all having a decent day or a nice evening. I guess this is a bit later than we streamed last time, hoping to reach different groups of people when I go live if possible. If not, hey, they're always available after the fact. You're free to watch these whenever is most convenient for you, but that's part of the reason I actually run some members posts for the people who are supporting the channel directly. I let them ask questions ahead of time so that even if you're not available during the live stream, you can get a question in. So I figured we might as well kick off with some of those to start the stream. Some of these were kind of funny. Um, but here we go. We have Nathan um, Gibson asking, do walruses believe in God? Probably not, is my guess. But also, he asked, why don't companies like Google, Apple, etc., not make more of an effort to be integrated in Tesla in some fashion? Well, I don't know. I think the question is kind of skewed in a particular way, in my opinion. I mean, I feel like Apple and Google are usually pretty invested and pretty interested in trying to get CarPlay and Android Auto on as many vehicles as possible. I really don't think there's much they can do about specifically getting involved in Tesla. That's all up to Tesla, not so much the um, not so much the tech company's fault. So Tesla, I think, honestly has come a long way in terms of Apple integration. For one, the iOS app is incredible. Like, it's a super app. There's so much stuff that you can do straight from the iOS app. That manages your insurance information. It manages your charging. You can do route planning within there. You manage everything with the car. You can check your tire pressure. So Tesla did everything they could to make and also, I forgot to mention, most recently, the biggest development, the biggest upgrade is the implementation of Siri shortcuts in um, with the iOS app, and that's something Tesla did. But Siri shortcuts have been around for a long time. It just took a while. But outside of that, we got Apple Music integration last year. I'm still hoping that eventually we could get AirPlay in the car. That, in my opinion, would be a big deal because then you could just kind of cast whatever you want on the big screen. The next big thing that I hope Apple adds, and it's not really, sorry, not Apple. The next big thing I hope Tesla adds that would not just benefit the iPhone, although more iPhones would benefit from it, but there's already a new wireless charging standard called the Qi 2, which is basically the same wireless charging coils, but with a magnetic ring around it, which is what Apple brands MagSafe. But now Qi 2 has implemented that same magnet array, which means that other companies can use it if they want to. If Google or Samsung or OnePlus or Huawei or whoever decides I want to implement Qi 2, then they get the same locking in place magnetic rings that the iPhone has. So if Tesla integrated Qi 2 so that you don't have to worry so much about the phones sliding around. You could just drop them and the magnets hold them in place. That would be kind of cool, but honestly, I don't think Apple and Google can do much more. Frankly, they've done quite a bit. But Porsche, I think, is a good example of a company that's put a lot of time into Apple and iPhone integration. I haven't looked too deep into it, but I've been hearing people tell me about Porsche accessing some of the new enhanced CarPlay features. Like, CarPlay is able to control a little bit more of the car. It's not quite as immersive as the full-on demo that they showcased last year at Dub Dub, but yeah, I think the biggest one, if Tesla really wanted your iPhone to work well with the car, they would come up with some form of CarPlay, but even I struggle to see how well they could really integrate that, considering Tesla's just got this one display for the most part controlling everything, and you would get conflicting UI. You would have the full self-driving visualization, and then you'd have battery preconditioning and route planning, and CarPlay wouldn't really know what to do with that. So it would get messy kind of quickly, in my opinion. But I hope that answers his question. You guys got lots of tech questions. um, Ivan is in the chat, though. That's good. Yo, yo, thanks for joining. iPhone 15 and Teslas are a complete waste of money. Well, you've come to the right channel. Let's just tell everybody what they like to watch videos about is a waste of time. Um, Complete waste of money. Let me know something that doesn't track you. Cole Crawford says, I bought a Hyundai Elantra inline all digital displays. I'm hoping Hyundai implements the new CarPlay. I remember a bunch of companies saying they wanted to implement it, but then it didn't really go anywhere. And Apple said that we would see the first models with it by the end of this year, and we haven't really seen much development on it. I think it's probably more complicated than they realized. My guess is Apple started working on that enhanced CarPlay, and it wasn't really, they didn't even really have a working demo of it. They just made that kind of 15-second rendering that showcased, if CarPlay took over the speedometer and the seat controls and the hatch, and like, what if CarPlay could do everything? So they probably came up with that little marketing video. And then once they realized how complicated it is to give a third party access within a vehicle to all of those vehicle controls, especially with a legacy automaker that doesn't quite grasp how your software needs to be optimized and drivers have to be designed specifically for all these different companies, all these different controllers throughout the car, like a Ford vehicle, and the software and the chips and all the little intricate details that go into it are far more complicated than a Tesla's, with increasingly more in-house design controllers. And once Apple probably got closer to realizing, oh, wait a second, enhanced CarPlay is going to be kind of a huge pain in the butt, um, I think that they probably went quiet on it for a reason, because now we've had maybe three-ish Apple events since that original announcement, and at none of the last three Apple events did they talk about the new CarPlay experience. So, um, Brandon Kwong says, "Am I upgrading to the iPhone 15?" Eventually, I probably will, but I don't plan on doing it on launch day. I think you can get them cheaper, used, and I'm also more interested in the international version with the SIM tray, because the US version still doesn't have one. For really no gain. It's eSIM only, but the part of the phone that had the SIM tray has been replaced with a piece of plastic. So I've lost interest in, I guess, buying brand new iPhones on launch day, just because it's the most expensive way to do it. So I'm trying to make it a as little of a waste of money as possible. Anyway, let's address the thumbnail. I guess that's what a lot of people want to know more about. I think Ivan was the one who asked about this. He said he wants us to talk about the new report that GigaTexas is going to build the cheap Tesla and robotaxi instead of GigaMexico. So this was kind of an interesting turn of events. I don't want to say I really like predicted it, because I didn't really, but I do remember people getting way too overly excited about Giga Mexico. Like, for one, it was the probably most interesting announcement from Tesla's Investor Day, was that, okay, we've decided on a new Gigafactory location. But my guess is the authorities in Mexico promised Elon a speedy development, and they said, "Oh yeah, we can bypass all those permits and paperwork and regulations. We can skip all of that, and you can get building on your factory really, really quick." And there were all these people saying that, "Oh, Giga Mexico is going to be built up so fast; it's going to be faster than Giga Shanghai. It's going to be cranking out vehicles in just 8 months." Well, Investor Day was 6 months ago, and they still haven't quite broken ground on the facility yet. So that's definitely not happening. And from what we've gathered from news sources, as well as leakers and people involved with the Giga Mexico development, they've been saying that it's all just more paperwork drama. It's all, the permits are ending up being a lot more complicated to get right than they thought, and there was probably some promises made by governors or city officials that they couldn't necessarily keep. They just wanted Elon to make a big investment, and there were definitely some, like, it felt like authority figures that were pushing for Tesla to announce something. Like, it felt like the president was announcing Giga Mexico prematurely, and there were governors and city officials all saying, "Oh yeah, no, Giga Mexico's right here. Tesla's going to invest billions and billions," and it still happened the other day. I think I saw Sawyer Merritt tweeting about it, saying that Tesla plans on investing $15 billion in the Mexico area over the next 2 years. And everyone was like, 15 billion? I mean, 2 years over the course of the factory's lifetime, 15 billion is a bit more reasonable, but within 2 years, 15 billion was a bit much. So it's a lot of red tape, essentially. and it's ending up being far more complex. So also that ties into the more recent reports, which is that Tesla wants to get going and start development on their smaller, next generation vehicle platform. Whether that's a robotaxi or whether that's a Model 2, is kind of still up for debate. It's probably a bit of both. But they talked mostly about that next gen vehicle platform at Investor Day, which involved 1000-volt architecture, the 48-volt low voltage architecture, all the controllers being designed in house, the unboxed process to manufacturing, where you paint individual pieces and bring them all together. There are all these advancements and innovations they were planning on implementing. Oh, yeah, the next generation hairpin powertrain, which doesn't use any rare earth materials, only costs $1,000 for a motor to power the whole vehicle. All of that, it sounds like they want to start development on it and start building it at GigaTexas first, not GigaMexico, because of the construction delays. Which is interesting, honestly. I did not see that coming for a couple of reasons. For one, Dave Lee, who I believe to be a trustworthy source, got to interview a bunch of the Tesla executives at Investor Day, and he didn't get to specify who exactly told him, but he did say that some of the executives he talked to, Dave Lee is not, in my opinion, like a clickbait YouTuber that will say anything to get views and that kind of thing. But when he was at the Investor Day presentation, he asked a few executives what Giga Mexico is targeting in terms of a market, because of course the common assumption is that Giga Mexico is going to be doing the same types of things that Ford would do in Mexico, which is, you build the vehicle in Mexico because it's close to the United States. That way the labor is cheaper, and then you can bring all those vehicles that you built for cheap into the U.S. And Dave Lee said that was not the intention. The executives were telling him that Giga Mexico was intending to build cheaper vehicles, yes, with the lower cost of labor, but also that those vehicles were going to be targeting Central America, including Mexico and South America, which didn't have that much of an EV presence yet. So Tesla was going to be expanding it into new markets, not making vehicles for the United States, at least for a long time. Maybe in the future they would get to that, but I suppose that's still possible if GigaTexas ends up building the smaller next gen vehicle platform, but the reason I'm skeptical, or the reason I'm questioning it mostly, is because I'm not of the belief that Tesla's going to figure out level 5 robotaxis in the near future, which is, I think, probably what the Tesla team has decided. Like, you got to get the code working, Elon. You got to get the software operational before we start mass producing vehicles without steering wheels or pedals. So in the meantime, there were references to this with Franz arguing with Elon over designs in the new Elon biography by Walter Isaacson, which was that a lot of the Tesla team basically was like, we can design a vehicle with a steering wheel and pedals that people can buy, and then we can easily convert that we can easily remove the steering wheel and pedals from that vehicle in the future as you develop robotaxi. So it's not like we have to pick one design over another. We can focus on a $25,000 cheap passenger vehicle, and then if they do figure out robotaxis, it shouldn't be too hard to take out some of those driver controls, probably remove the mirrors and that kind of thing. Um, so I think it'd be weird to build a vehicle that's intended for the Latin America market at GigaTexas. Um, Mostly, I guess, because I don't think that the next generation vehicle platform, or a Tesla compact, whatever you want to call it, or if it's anything like the mock-ups that were in my last video, the Cyber Coupe, that type thing, I don't think it would particularly sell that well in the US market. I don't think the United States is that interested in compact cars or smaller vehicles. Like, they just don't sell at mass volume here. The top selling vehicles in the US, of course, as you guys know, pickup trucks, SUVs. So it's going to be Cybertruck Model Y. That seems to be what most of what GigaTexas is building. So to add in a compact car and an already busy factory that's quite tapped out, I'm not really sure what section of GigaTexas they would have room for it. I'm assuming that the reports are just saying, well, there's a lot of property around GigaTexas, but they would essentially have to build an entirely different facility, that I guess could share some of the some of the batteries that they're building there and that type of thing. But it sounds like it's not going to go as smoothly as we had hoped. Is essentially what all this is saying. um, Bill, it was just a major tease, I think. Yeah. Jackson Smith. Yeah, there's a rendering. There's a really cool rendering that was made by someone on Twitter, Tanuki_JP. I linked them in the description if you want to check them out. But yeah, they made this rendering of the back, logistics lot at GigaTexas, and it's just packed full of Cybertrucks. And because the report that Ivan wanted us to dive into was about, GigaTexas picking up the slack of GigaMexico, I thought that would be an appropriate rendering to showcase the. It's a really impressive rendering, honestly. It looks real. It looks quite believable to me. But yeah, I guess it's not a real. They don't actually have that many Cybertrucks there, at least yet. I think probably a year from now they'll be cranking out Cybertrucks at pretty high volume. Um, Ivan said would be better for them to build the Roadster instead, in my opinion. PR wise, I agree with you. Like mission statement wise, probably not. But that's kind of my issue with Tesla's position on the Roadster. Honestly, I don't think it would be that crazy or that unreasonable for them to scrap the Roadster because the Plaid Model S has kind of achieved the goal of everything the Roadster intended to do. Like when they unveiled the Roadster, the main motivation behind it was we want to show that an electric car can be just as good and in fact, even better than a gas car, which is mostly a advertising thing. That's mostly a PR thing. We're trying to convince people that electric cars are the future. Of course, that was back in 2017, in the very, very early days of the Model 3 ramp. The Model 3 ramp was not going very well at the time. And the narrative around EVs has changed a lot, in my opinion, since 2017. For one, electric vehicles have become the best sellers. The Model Y and Model 3 are selling incredibly well. There's all these new federal tax credits. There's a ton more push from legacy automakers to build EVs. And then, of course, Tesla in 2021 released the Plaid Model S. And that had a very similar message, which is like, hey, here's a car that can do 0 to 60 under 2 seconds. And unlike the Roadster, this is actually a sedan. It's very safe and it's got 5 seats and it's a hatchback. And it has essentially close to the same specs as that Roadster was going to have. Um, and now they're kind of struggling to find buyers for the Model S and X. They keep having to lower the prices more and more and more. It sounds like they finally found a good stride. I don't know how sustainable it will be, but there appears to be a decent number of orders coming in, and actually Tesla lowered the referral credit bonuses for referring someone to buy a Model S or X, which to me is evidence that there's actually a good amount of orders coming in now after the huge price cuts they made. But still, of course, the margins I can't imagine are as good once they start knocking off, 10, 15 grand from the price. So if they are struggling to find buyers for their 70 to $80,000 vehicles, I can't imagine now is a great time to release a $250,000 vehicle. Um, and I'd appreciate either them getting to work on it, even if it's at very low volume, or just scrapping it and refunding all the deposits and probably giving whoever ordered a Roadster some kind of discount on a Plaid S or something, or a Plaid X on anything. Just like, we're sorry for taking your money all those years ago. So as a compensation, we're going to give you a big price cut on any existing Tesla. I do think a lot about how the people way back in 2017, if you ordered a Founders Series Roadster, that was $250,000 you had to put down. And I don't believe it was refundable, but you had to put down 250 grand at the end of 2017. And here it is at the end of 2023, and you still have nothing. Now, to be fair, the people with that kind of money to put down on an unreleased product, they probably had a lot of money. It's not like, I doubt that many people like sold all of their retirement funds and threw their whole life savings just so they could reserve a Roadster. The kind of people that had $250,000 in cash sitting around probably are the kind of people that had a Tesla already and can afford a Plaid Model S and probably can afford for that kind of money to be tied around for a while. But a lot of people, even the people who didn't get the Founder Series, had to wire $50,000 to Tesla. and all these years later, they still don't have anything. So I would say Tesla should scrap the Roadster and just say, you know what? It's not that important anymore. We're more focused on our mission, which is mass adoption, high volume EVs, not low volume. So have all your money back, and we'll give you a $20,000 discount as a apology for holding your money for that long. But that's probably more expensive for them. They're more likely to just Tesla's like, nah, we'll just keep kicking the can down the road and say, maybe next year we'll build a Roadster. Maybe we'll make it some year. But the problem is the Roadster keeps getting pushed back because Tesla's logic is, well, something else is more important than the Roadster. We need to focus on that. And my issue with that is there will always be something more important than the Roadster. If your mission statement is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy, there will never be a time where the Roadster is the most important thing you can work on. After the Model 3 Highland ramp, then it's going to be, the compact car, the next gen platform. Or after the Cybertruck ramp, then it's going to be about the van. Or after the van, it could be more about ramping the semi. Or after the van, it could be about the cyber SUV. All of these things are going to have more demand and more public interest than the Roadster, because the Roadster is, a very expensive, not a lot of people are going to buy it or be able to sit in it. So there's always going to be some vehicle, or Tesla will be more focused on robotaxis or on Optimus the robot. All of those things, they could argue, are more important than the Roadster. So at some point you just have to accept that, okay, the Roadster, we should make it, we should deliver it, but it's not the most important vehicle to us. So, but we promised we would make it, so let's make it. um I I guess they could do it at GigaTexas, but personally, I think it would make more sense to build it in Fremont, mostly because that's where the other Plaid vehicles are being made, and it's a low volume vehicle. So GigaTexas is probably more focused on high volume. But uh, thanks for tuning in, Ivan. I'll catch you in the next one. Um, Mike says Cybertruck EPA numbers win. I'm getting more and more confused, to be honest. It's starting to make me wonder, can Tesla deliver these things without an EPA filing? Maybe Tesla is learning. Maybe they've figured out that we're all waiting for EPA results and they don't want to get it tested or published on the EPA's website yet because they know we're going to see the numbers, and they don't want us to see the numbers yet, maybe because they're disappointing. But um, Jackson Smith says, do I think if the Model 3 gets to a point where the S seems useless, would they keep the S Plaid and just rebrand it as the Roadster? That way the Roadster could come out and the S could disappear. Um, well, the Roadster wouldn't look like an S. I mean, the Roadster by definition would have to be a two-door. So I don't think they would necessarily just rebrand the S Plaid as the Roadster. Um, but I see what you're getting at, Jackson, because the Model 3 definitely gained a lot of Model S luxury features, and the Model S was already kind of struggling with demand. And I don't think Highland is going to help much because it just made the Model 3 far more compelling. And in fact, I've seen a lot of people who are Plaid Model S owners say there's a bunch of things the Model 3 gets better than the Model S now. So, and of course it's way cheaper and it'll probably qualify for the federal tax credit and everything. So, yeah, I I'm I could visualize a situation where they just decide the Model S is going to be Plaid only. I don't think they would call it Roadster per se, but just for the sake of manufacturing simplicity, just trying to keep things simple and probably try to keep prices down. I don't actually think the Plaid powertrain is that much more expensive than the dual motor. I'm sure it's more expensive, but I don't think it's by a huge margin. So I basically I'm saying that I think the Plaid Model S has a better margin because they can charge more for it, considering the performance. But it's the same battery pack in the long range in the Plaid. But if they really wanted to, simplify manufacturing, I could see a point where the S and X just become tri-motor exclusive, and that's all they do. I'm very curious to see if they have some kind of long-term plan for the Model S and X. I actually have maybe one or two videos planned about that, but just as a little sneak peek for you guys, I actually think the Model S and X could be the first, you know, older Teslas that start making the switch to, this is not a rumor, this is not a leak or anything. This is just pure speculation. If Tesla does want to keep around the Model S and X and try to find more ways of separating them from the 3 and Y, Something I would suggest is updating those vehicles over to the 1000 volt architecture like the Cybertruck has, and giving them the also 48 volt low voltage architecture, and letting them charge way faster. You know, if they've got the 1000 volts and they've got the updated wiring and maybe an updated battery pack, letting them charge at over 300 kilowatts, maybe over 350 kilowatts with that high voltage architecture. That's probably way down the road though, because it's going to be dependent on how the rollout goes for V4 superchargers, or if they just end up retrofitting a ton of V3 superchargers. There's potential. That's something that's going to be very complicated and very expensive to add to the Model 3 and Y, because those are so much higher volume. And as we already saw with the Highland refresh, it's mostly cosmetic interior, exterior changes. They didn't change much under the hood. It's the same battery pack, same powertrain. And because these vehicles are so high volume and they are kind of the lifeblood of the company, like that keeps the company afloat selling Model 3s and Ys, they can't afford to shut down those assembly lines for too long. So, in my personal opinion, I don't think they're gonna be able to update the 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 high voltage battery pack or the low voltage battery pack very soon, because they're just focused on scale. How do we build a ton of these things? Jackson says, "What exactly does the 1000 volt entail? I don't fully understand that yet." Um, so I'm not great at explaining this, so forgive me if I'm not. There's an analogy where people compare it to like a hose and the speed at which the water is moving through the hose. The voltage is kind of like the size of the pipe, I think, is how I understand it. It's like, you know, if you have a bigger pipe, more of the water can get through it, whereas if you have a smaller pipe, even if there's a lot of force, the water can't get through it as well. There's more losses. I think a better analogy is kilowatts, you know, power output is amps times volts. So if you have a 400 volt vehicle, in order to get, you know, like a level 2 charge on it, it needs 32 amps, that kind of thing, or you need a few hundred amps if you're at a DC fast charger. And if you're on a higher voltage architecture, it means you don't need to push as many amps, amps being like the water flowing through the pipe. So you can more efficiently charge a vehicle at higher speed. This is what Lucid does to beat the Model S and X with their faster charging. The problem is they assumed Electrify America would be reliable, but that's a different story. So if we're just imagining a situation where Electrify America is good and reliable, then Lucid is able to charge sometimes a little bit over 350 kilowatts, much faster than the Model S and X, primarily because of their higher voltage architecture. So they don't have to push that many amps into their battery pack, because with that higher voltage, they can efficiently charge the pack and get, you know, 350 kilowatts very efficiently. And the main reason you want it done efficiently and you can't push too many amps into the pack is because if the voltage is lower and you're pushing a bunch of amps into it, there's more losses. There's more heat involved, and you can't get the wiring and the battery pack too hot. So that higher voltage essentially allows the battery pack to take in more energy without overheating and without as many energy losses. That's part of the reason Lucid has such an efficient powertrain, even though it's heavier than the Model S. And I don't even think they're about on par with the Model S in terms of aerodynamics. It's still able to achieve way better efficiency at highway speed than the Model S, partly because of the aero, but partly also because of that higher voltage architecture. So those are the big benefits of higher voltage: faster charging, better efficiency, which typically results in better range. So if they are looking for ways to separate the Model S and X from the 3 and Y, to me that would be a pretty cool under the hood update, because again, I feel like, I know it was 2 years ago now, but I feel like they just updated the interior and there's really not that much more they can do to the interior other than bring it more Highland features, like bring some of the ambient light strips. They've already got ventilated seats on the S and X. I guess they could give it massaging seats. There's some other luxury cars that have that these days. Um, I can't think. They've already got a driver display. I guess there's other. I'll do a wish list video, by the way, in the future. I'll do a video explaining all the things that they could add to the S and X to improve the desirability. There's not a ton. So in my opinion, getting into the spec upgrade so that maybe they could beat Lucid at the charging times, and with an improved higher voltage architecture, they could also get better range too. So maybe if they made a Model S with like a 450 or a 500-mile range, that would increase the desirability. I hope that makes some sense for you guys. Cayenne says, I don't think they need 1,000 volts. My car charges fast enough to quickly eat and get back to a road trip. Look, I agree with you. My car fast charges at 170 kilowatts at its peak, and I still think it charges plenty fast. I don't even charge as fast as most Model Ys and 3s. Most people are charging at 250 kilowatts. I'm perfectly happy with 170 because it gives, like you just said, it gives me time to go, but get food or use the restroom and come back. And oftentimes when I'm on a road trip, it's still uh charges so fast that I have to run back to the car to unplug it because we weren't done eating and that kind of thing. However, we're talking about the Model S and X here. The Model S and X are not meant to be good enough. Like, they're fine. The Model S and X, they're struggling to find buyers. That's why they keep having to lower the prices. And the problem is the Model 3 and Y are so good, they're so competent, they're so affordable that no one can justify the Model S and X because we're all looking at them like, there's not that many advantages here. So the key into justifying, should the Model S and X continue to exist or should they be scrapped, and maybe we can retrofit that part of the factory for more Model Y production or more Model 3 production. The debate is, okay, if you want to keep around the Model S and X and you want to justify its existence, what can you add to it to help it separate itself? How can you make it seem like, okay, this is way cooler, or this is offering something that the Model 3 and Y can't? In my opinion, ultra fast charging would be a good one because the masses, like you said, they don't really need it. I agree with you. I think the vast majority of EVs in the future are probably not going to charge much faster than 200, 250 kilowatts. Personally, I think that's plenty, especially if most EVs in the future are going to have a 60, 70 kilowatt hour pack, not 100. Um, even if those 60, 70 kilowatt hour packs were on the higher voltage architecture, they probably couldn't sustain that 250 kilowatts for very long because there's just not enough room in the battery pack to dump that much energy. So I think keeping the mass market vehicles and the affordable vehicles on the lower voltage architecture is probably fine. Um, it's just going to be too complicated and too expensive to retrofit them all. But Model S and X are relatively low production compared to 3Y, and also Cybertruck is probably going to be a higher volume than S and X eventually. Not at first, but it'll get there. So I'm trying to think of things that the S and X could offer that would separate themselves. And I think like super fast charging would be a good idea because we know the technology exists. The Cybertruck's going to have this higher voltage architecture. The Model S and X are meant to be more luxurious and offer more premium features. And I would consider it a pretty premium feature to be like, oh, what if you could plug in your car and it's done charging, in 10 minutes instead of 20, that kind of thing. Anyway, Mike in the Woods says, what are your thoughts on the long range and medium range chemistry comment? Think about Robotaxi will use something other than LFP. It was an interesting comment. I think I told you my thoughts on it on Twitter. We were interacting a little bit. Sorry, now the sun's getting in my face. I should sit in the back seat. Huh? Sorry, I know it's a little distracting. Um, I don't think that there's necessarily a chemistry for lower range vehicles. I think Elon just uses medium range as the bare minimum. I don't think Elon would use the form short range. He just, because short range EVs makes it sound like you're comfortable with, I don't know, 80-mile range, 100-mile range. I don't think he is. I'm pretty sure Elon at the bare minimum wants all the EVs they make to be 250 or so, maybe 200. So I think he was referring to just LFP makes sense for the standard range vehicles, which is what they're already doing. And I think that's what everybody's going to be using in the future. I mean, there were previous comments where Elon said on earnings calls that he thinks LFP will be about 2/3 of all EVs in the future. I agree with him on that. Honestly, I think it could actually be more. The last third of EVs will use nickel-based batteries so that they can have higher range, which is mostly going to make sense in colder climates and for pickup trucks that need to tow long distances. That's where LFP probably won't make as much sense, but I don't think that's the vast majority of driving. I still think uh, the bulk of vehicles, the bulk of cars on the road are totally fine charging from home. And, you'd have a point if the average American was driving 100, 150 miles a day, but the data suggests that the average American, um, and the Americans drive more than most other people around the world, but the average American is driving between 30 and 40 miles a day. And I know that's not every day. There's definitely people who go on big road trips and stuff, but for the vast majority, I predict people will pick with time. More people are going to pick cheaper EV with lower range than more expensive EV with higher range. It's already happening, honestly. Tesla's been saying for a while that they've been selling more EVs with LFP than not. And the more awareness that spreads about charging speed and range and charging from home, and that the longer range doesn't really translate to that much better trip time, um, the more people are going to realize that having a standard range EV that doesn't go as far as their gas car is okay because they can plug it in from home and they can save themselves way more money by going with an LFP based Tesla versus a non LFP. Um, Maybe Elon is referring to sodium ion because I know one of their big battery suppliers, CATL, has been working on a sodium ion battery, which I think they've said has been going pretty well. Um, I think they said that they've gotten it to a point where they feel comfortable shipping it in an EV. Sodium ion batteries should be very cheap. I think even cheaper than LFP. The downside about them, which I'm not that excited about, although I've debated people on this, is that sodium ion, the big challenge with them is the cycle life, which is like the opposite of LFP. I think I'm still, maybe because I own a Tesla, I'm sitting on an LFP battery pack right now, and I love it because sorry, people are just texting me. You get better cycle life than the nickel based batteries, and it's cheaper. So it's like, okay, the battery lasts long. You can charge it to 100% every day, and it's more cost effective than nickel based cells. So to me, it's like, okay, the only downside of LFP is the range, but we've all kind of established from driving EVs for a while that range isn't really the problem. It's more of charging. And that gets better as more chargers are deployed and as people understand that you can plug it in from home. These vehicles are already pretty efficient. So there's a ton of people already just charging from a 110 outlet, and that's good enough. So I think the cost advantages and the higher cycle life is the main interest I have in LFP. Sodium ion, they're trying to get it to the point where the cycle life is almost as good as the nickel based batteries, which in my opinion are probably not as good as they should be. Like LFP is kind of the standard. I think more people are going to be comfortable with the idea of the battery pack lasting 2,000 to 4,000 cycles, not 800 to 1,000 cycles, especially if people plan on buying the vehicle and owning it for decades. So the argument I've had with other people, I don't remember who, but the sodium ion is even cheaper than LFP, yes, but probably needs to be replaced sooner than a nickel based battery pack or degrades a lot faster. And the energy density is also not great either. I think it's close to that of LFP. The main thing is it doesn't require as much or if any lithium, which is the big advantage. Sodium is basically salt. It's very, very easy to find that. There's a ton of salt to pull from, and it's way cheaper than lithium is. So the argument is, okay, could we build EVs with sodium-based battery packs that maybe don't last as long, but they're so cheap to build that we can replace them fairly simply. So, okay, maybe the battery pack wears out, but it doesn't cost that much to replace the battery pack. That's the counter argument I've heard that I'm kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's a decent argument, but I my prediction is more people in the future are going to want to buy a vehicle that doesn't require as much service. So I feel like sodium batteries wouldn't be as popular if it required more people to go out and buy them. So that's sorry, that was just kind of a side tangent, but Mike asked about it, so I figured. Um, I occasionally listen to the Waveform podcast. I'm not like religiously. Whoops, the car fell asleep. Sorry. Um, I, I don't listen to it like religiously, but every once in a while I tune in. Um, and the higher voltage allows you to use thinner slash lower cost wiring. Yes, that's true. Thanks for bringing that up, Brad. There's lots of advantages to higher voltage, but Tesla has talked about it on their earnings calls in the past, and they mentioned that it doesn't really save them that much money on the 3 and Y, but on a higher sized vehicle that requires a bigger battery pack like the Cybertruck or the Tesla Semi, that's where it starts to save them a lot more money. Um, Burkhart says I'm late. Can someone summarize the news that the title is referring to? Basically, the news is GigaMexico is caught up in a bunch of red tape and a bunch of permits and paperwork. It kind of reminds me of Giga Berlin, which is like, okay, here's Giga Berlin. We're going to get it online in the next year, year and a half. And there's so much paperwork and government issues and red tape that it gets caught up in. And it took way longer to build than they thought. Basically, everyone keeps expecting gigafactories to go up at the speed of Giga Shanghai, but no other country really can offer that amount of approval and permits being issued fast enough to the point that basically all gigafactories end up taking 2 to 3 years to build, even though everyone promises they'll be done in a year or a year and a half. So the news was that Tesla is going to start development on their next generation vehicle platform, the Model 2 slash Robotaxi. They're going to start building that at GigaTexas instead of GigaMexico, and that's like the internal plan change. However, I'm skeptical of the report because I originally thought, based on Dave Lee's comments about what the executive said at Investor Day, that GigaMexico is going to be targeting the Latin America market, and it doesn't make much sense to me to build a Latin America intended vehicle at GigaTexas because GigaTexas is probably going to want to deliver vehicles in the U.S. and a compact car slash a small car. Maybe it's a three-wheeler, maybe it's a two-seater. I don't know, but whatever that smaller Tesla is, I don't think it will sell that well in the U.S. because the U.S. tends to prefer pickup trucks, Cybertrucks too. But yeah, they tend to. The U.S. market is way more interested in SUVs and pickup trucks, and that vastly outsells sedans, and sedans vastly outsell compact cars. So compact cars are just less popular here. Uh-oh. Sorry for the stream. The bit rate was kind of all over the place. I think it fixed itself though. Okay, I think I read that. Tesla does not have that many car segments to sell. Cars have, what do you mean scrap? I assume you're talking about the S and X. Oh, because earlier you said they could give away TD said that they could give away full self-driving included with the S and X. That's not a horrible idea, actually, if the demand gets bad enough. Just say, hey, you buy Model S and X, it comes with full self-driving. You don't have to pay extra for it. You know? Doesn't really cost that much extra to Tesla. I guess they could argue that they lose out on more potential revenue, but if people aren't buying the Model S and X, then they're really not losing out on that much potential revenue. Um, Here we go. Jacob's talking about it. According to the Elon biography, they moved the next gen platform to GigaTexas because they wanted all the engineers to be right next to the line and the engineers wouldn't move to Mexico. That's a decent argument too. I remember reading that, but for some reason during the stream I forgot to bring it up. Thanks for acknowledging that, Jake. Um, I guess that makes sense from a logistics standpoint. I guess I just figured that a lot of this is hypothetical designing. Does it have to be all done in person, or can they do a lot of this, like design a test bed, a trial production line at GigaTexas, and then take what you've learned there and bring it to Mexico? Do the engineers all have to be in Mexico to build the car there? Maybe they do. I don't know. William says sodium is bad. There's no future in that. Well, I want to believe you, but CATL is a massive battery pack supplier for Tesla and other EV companies, and they're the ones saying that there's a future in it. Who knows if it'll be the vast majority of battery packs in the future, but they've been testing them and say that they're good enough quality to go in EVs, but probably with some compromises, probably with not as good as range and not as good as cycle life, but the perk of they'll be cheap. You could probably buy a real cheap EV in the future with a sodium-based battery pack, but it'll degrade a lot faster. Yeah, everyone's saying they just need to build the Roadster at Texas. I'm just trying to figure out where. GigaTexas is already maxed out, and it appears they're having to expand the south wall at GigaTexas because the Cybertruck manufacturing area is already reached its capacity. So it's already kind of full, and I'm trying to visualize where the heck they can put, you know, a whole nother vehicle line up there. Like it might have to be a whole separate building, to be honest. Um, let's see. Robin says they need to produce the Roadster to lay the gauntlet down that there is no refuting that Tesla and EVs are the answer. I don't think there's any refuting that now. I don't think the Roadster would change anything. For one, like we've already seen other companies, like the Rimac made the Navara, which is this insane hypercar that you go 0 to 60 in 1.6 seconds or something. It's super fast, and we have long range EVs now. We've got legacy automakers making EVs. We have government mandates forcing everybody to make EVs by a certain time. So why do they need to make a vehicle to lay the gauntlet down? If you don't believe EVs are the future now, I don't think a Roadster would convince you. Like we already have, like I said, Rimac Navara, the Plaid Model S. These vehicles are insanely high performance, insanely fast. We've got vehicles like the Lucid Air going over 500 miles on a charge. We've got great charging networks coming in. We've got lots of people, more and more people every year buying EVs. The debate mostly I think people have against EVs is that they're too expensive, not that they're not fast enough. And the best way for Tesla to combat that narrative is to make more and more affordable vehicles, which is what they're doing. All that attention on the next gen vehicle platform, and of course, price cuts and stuff on the Model 3 and Y. Tesla often advertising how, with the federal tax credit, the Model 3 and Y are cheaper than a new Camry or a Civic, even once you factor in the gas savings and stuff. So, if someone doesn't believe EVs are the future right now, given the current landscape, I don't think a Roadster is going to change their mind. They're not going to be like, oh, well, I didn't think EVs were the future, but then Tesla strapped a cold gas thruster to a two-seater, and then it did 0 to 60 in 1.1 seconds, and then I was convinced. Okay, you know what? Once you put the rocket in the back of the car, okay, EVs are the future. I believe it now. No, I don't think that makes sense. I don't think they need to lay the gauntlet down. Tesla needs to focus on profitability and lower cost vehicles, which is pretty much what they're doing, it seems like. Free Teslas for all. Burkhardt said recently had this idea that they should make the Plaid Plus Model S, then give Roadster reservations one of them plus 100,000 Tesla credits. Oh, and scrap the Roadster in the process, is what I'm assuming. The Plaid Plus Model S would include FSD. Yeah, honestly, seeing them give away FSD more and more now, I don't think the take rate is where they want it to be. I don't think they're getting as many people to go with FSD as they thought they would. Um, I'm loving that, by the way. I want them to give it away. I, I think it's important for Tesla, but specifically Elon. I know you're watching this. I think it's important for Tesla to understand that people will not believe everything they say forever. You cannot continue to miss deadlines and continue to push off these promises and expect people to just keep believing you. Sure, you're going to get some hyperboles that will keep falling for it, that will always say, "Oh yeah, no, this is real. This time it's actually going to happen. It's actually going to happen." If you keep pushing it off long enough, people are going to start saying, "Okay, I think you're full of bologna sandwiches." Um, and we're seeing the effects of that. We're seeing that, okay, Tesla, you keep promising us this, and when you keep missing your promises, we're not going to pay for it. We're not going to get behind this. You're going to get more and more people posting online that, okay, FSD beta, it's cool, but it's not doing what I thought it would, or I regret buying it, or it's not worth it. And when that narrative keeps getting pushed, you're not going to get more sales. So in order to increase the take rate, you have to start lowering the prices, which is what they did. Now they've knocked off $3,000 from FSD. Now they're including 90 days of free FSD with every new Tesla, assuming you use a referral code, which they used to not do that. And if the take rate doesn't improve much, which I predict it won't, because $12,000 is still a lot of money, $200 a month is still pretty absurd for a level 2 driver assistance. Granted, it's very capable and it's very cool. Don't get me wrong. I want to try out FSD. I want to play around with it. It's a fun experiment. It's a fun, like, let's see what the car can do. But $200 a month or 12,000 up front, no, I can't justify that. I am struggling to justify it with referral credits. Like, I have enough referral credits to pay for 6 months of full self-driving for free, and I still can't justify it. I'm still like, I don't know. I could use those credits on charging, and I'd rather just charge. So I'm still debating it. There's still times where I'm like, yeah, maybe I should try it. We're doing a road trip later. Maybe I'll use it. And then I talk myself out of it because I'm like, well, the last time I used FSD, I wasn't that impressed, and it kind of annoyed me, and it made a lot of mistakes. So when we have more and more people not going for it, Tesla has to incentivize as an option. And if less and less people are comfortable buying $70,000 to $80,000 Teslas, maybe giving away FSD with the car. I'm not going to say it's confirmed, but I will say there's a pretty likely chance of that happening in the future, unless Tesla finds some way of drastically increasing Model S and X demand. I think a lot of it could come down to the interest rates. Interest rates for vehicles are pretty high right now, so there's a lot less people willing to spend that much money on a loan. But I feel like the Model S and X's are at a higher likelihood of being leased and or being bought out in cash because they're higher priced vehicles, so people with more money tend to buy them, and people with more money tend to not need as many car payments. So I don't know. You could kind of argue it either way. Um, let's see. Let's see. Roadster would be scrapped in this scenario. I assume it's easier to make the Plaid Plus than it is to make the Roadster. Probably, but the main difference with the Plaid Plus was that it needed a new battery pack. That was how they got it to 520 plus miles of range. I don't think they should necessarily build in a whole new battery pack. I think they could probably make the current battery pack work, but update the voltage, update the wiring to make it more efficient so that you could push the Model S longer range. Probably beat the efficiency of the Lucid because it is a lighter vehicle, and it's the Model S is pretty aerodynamic as is. Um, let's see. Keon says it honestly works pretty well, but it's not relaxing for most people to have to constantly monitor the car on FSD. I agree. I think FSD is probably good for making YouTube videos, but it's probably not that relaxing of an experience. Also, from having been in a Tesla with FSD several times, I wouldn't say it makes the driving experience more relaxing. If anything, it's a little bit more scary than just driving yourself. Um, he said Burkhardt said all the people who paid $250,000 for the Roadsters get $100,000 credit for whatever they want to buy. Yeah, yeah, that's that was my idea earlier, basically. But yeah, they should let people get a 15-day free trial once a year. Well, Elon did say, I think this was a shot in the shoot yourself in the foot moment. I don't think this was very smart of him, but Elon made a tweet at one point saying that when FSD is very smooth and reliable, we will let everybody have a free month trial. And I was like, okay, so he just admitted that as long as there's not a free month trial, it's not very smooth or very good. So as long as Tesla's not offering the free trial, I'm not too convinced that it's going to be a very relaxing of an experience. But it's 2023 and we still can't subscribe to FSD. Have to buy it outright. Mike is in Canada, by the way. Canada doesn't have the subscription. My guess is they don't have that much of a good take rate from the subscription either. Because anytime people ask about it, they always say, uh, it's not worth talking about. People are like, what's the take rate on the subscription? And they're like, that's not important right now. You should focus on how good the revenue will be for our robo taxis that are coming next year, that have been coming next year for the past 6 years. Jacob said Plaid Plus was just more of a range version. They would either wait for 4680s to get good like the original plan or do a double stack battery like planned on the Roadster. That would be a pretty decent compromise, I think. I just think that the 4680 cells were not as energy dense as they had hoped. And when they unveiled the Plaid Plus Model S, they probably thought the energy density was going to be way better than it ended up being. So I don't think it makes as much sense to completely re-engineer the battery pack on the Model S specifically for 4680s. But I agree with you. I like the idea of just taking two 1865 packs like we have currently in the Model S and stacking them up a bit. That might require some chassis re-engineering, but I don't know if it necessarily needs to be a 200 kilowatt hour battery pack, but maybe 120. You could have 260 packs put together, or I don't know. You could eat into the frunk space a little bit or into the trunk area a little bit. But just basically not for the sake of sales, because I know the Model S is already crushing the Lucid Air, but just for the sake of, flexing. if the Model S could smack down the Lucid Air. That would be kind of funny. And the main way the Lucid Air is able to achieve its amazing range is a larger battery pack and its higher voltage architecture. Lucid Air is around 900 volts, but Tesla's been working on 1,000 volts, which would be. That number sounds higher, right? So it must be better, but I know it's not that simple. But if Tesla could do 1,000 volts and they could fit a 120 slash 125 kilowatt hour pack in the Model S, um, they could probably get like a 530, maybe 550 mile range out of a sedan that can charge at 350 plus kilowatts. That would be pretty cool for the road trip machines. Like this would be like the Model S Cannonball edition. Like it's just super fast for highway travel and super long range. And because it's Tesla and they're trying to keep it incentivized, they probably wouldn't even charge that much for it. It would, when they first refresh it, it would probably be really expensive. But then over time, with Tesla's margins, they could probably get it down to 80,000, 70,000. Where it is today. That would be kind of cool to think about, a $75,000 EV that can go over 500 miles on a charge, still sit five people, still has a hatchback, still is super fast. It can still, go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds or whatever, and can fast charge quicker than any other sedan. That's how I would incentivize the Model S. But were any Plaid Plus Model S's sold? No, they got rid of them before they actually started deliveries. Um, if they do that, there's going to be chaos on the road. There's already chaos on the road. After Cybertruck ramps, we need a Cyber van. Just hop away from a truck to a van like Model 3 to Y. This is going to sound crazy, but I think about vans a lot, specifically what Tesla should do, because we know they're working on a van. Elon has admitted it on earnings calls. They showed it at Investor Day. There's a little covering over a van shaped vehicle. The issue I have with vans, back at it again with the white van. Sorry. Um, by design, they are horrible for aerodynamics. Like when you just picture, if I just say to you a Tesla van, you probably picture something that looks kind of like the Rivian van or the Mercedes e-Sprinter van, maybe combined with a Tesla semi front. But having that giant flat back half that just drops off, that is horrible for it. Creates so much drag, and vans tend to have very large frontal surface areas, which is why most electric vans on the market right now, like the Rivian van and the Mercedes van and the Ford e-Transit and all that, they don't have that good a range. And they have pretty big battery packs in them usually. I think the Mercedes has like 100 something kilowatt hours, and the range on the Mercedes I think is the best one I saw. The Mercedes electric van was like 230 miles of range or something, or maybe 220. And I was like, that's actually pretty good considering the size of the battery pack and the fact that it's like $70,000. For an electric van, that's not bad. The Ford e Transit, I think, is like 100 something mile range. Same thing with the Rivian. Because it's mainly for deliveries in cities, it doesn't have to go at highway speed all that much, so they don't really need the range to be that high. But if you're just looking for a high range van, the traditional van design is honestly not that good. It's not that practical. So if I was designing a van, I would try to fundamentally rethink it. I would apply a Aptera first principles approach type thing, and I would try to make it a bit. It would kind of look like a bullet train, where it kind of starts small and tapers. So it kind of starts small and gets big. Just picture like the very front end of a high speed rail train, and then do that on the back half of it as well. And just try to make it very teardrop shaped. And then I would move the doors to the sides instead of the back, which is more convenient. And I guess maybe what most people are used to with a van. You have the cargo in the back, and maybe there's some downsides and some compromises you have to make to putting the doors in the center. But I just keep thinking in my head, how could Tesla design a van that's more aerodynamic and more efficient? Um, if you're designing a low speed van that's just meant to drive around a city and do package deliveries, then doing what Rivian did is fine, because aerodynamics really only matters when you're going over 50 miles an hour, and those delivery vans are rarely going that fast anyway. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think a lot about the van, and I don't think what most people picture when they think cyber van. They just picture a Cybertruck that has a boxier back instead of a slanted back. And I'm just like, that would not be good for efficiency. And I guess I'm a efficiency obsessed guy. Van to me is a minivan for families. Yeah, I guess that would be popular, but again, by design, a minivan is not that great for aerodynamics. There's a reason there isn't a minivan on the market that's electric. Um, anyway, Clay says, how much are Teslas? Go to Tesla.com, pick out the one you want. It depends on which one. Burkhardt says, I don't really care how it happens, but they need to provide some closure for the Roadster. It's been 6 years and it looks pretty bad considering they took full price deposits, not $100 ones. I know, I agree. I think I would honestly appreciate it if they canceled it. I think it would be refreshing to be just like, you know what, we're done. Like, let's just cut our losses and say it doesn't really make sense anymore. We don't need a Roadster. It's going to be too expensive to build, and we're not going to be able to sell enough of them to justify the expense of manufacturing them. So, like you said, offer them a discount on a new Tesla S or X or whatever, or just give them straight up cash. I don't care. But it would be nice to just have closure and just say like, okay, it's not happening, or make it happen and start delivering them. But either of those scenarios is better than Tesla just continuing to delay it year after year after year. That's just getting old. That's getting really frustrating. I'm already past the point of it should be done by. Well, let's give them one more year and then we'll we'll lose hope after that. I'm past that. For me, that was 2022. I was like, okay, if they don't do it in 2022, they should just scrap it. And now we're at the end of 2023. I'm kind of done with it. I want them to make the Roadster. Obviously, that would be ideal. But My point is, I would rather them cancel it than continue to delay it indefinitely. Can you imagine if it's 2030, 2035, and they're still saying, oh yeah, we'll make the Roadster eventually? That would be just absurd. It would be ridiculous. I'm just wanting a Cybervan camper to match my Cybertruck overlanding rig. What What honestly would a Cybervan do that differently from the Cybertruck? I feel like there's all those what do you call it? Cyberlander accessories that make the Cybertruck into a little cabin in the bed. Yeah, give it a Viking funeral, exactly. Is there enough production capacity to double production for next year to meet their targets? I don't I'm not a good person to ask that, but let me think about it. I know Giga Berlin is not fully ramped. Giga Texas is not fully ramped. They're at a run rate of, I think, almost 300,000 a year. So within the next year, they could increase Berlin and Texas production. If they reach their max capacity, it'd be around 500,000 each. So that increases it another 500,000. And then Giga Shanghai is expanding as well. There's a new section at Giga Shanghai that might be able to add another 500,000, but they're already at a rate of like 2 million. The more I'm thinking about it, the more I want to say no. I don't think they can increase production by, or no, sorry. They only need to increase, if their production this year is 2 million, they only need to increase by 1 million. I was thinking they had to double. They only have to increase by 50% to hit their target. I think it should be possible. It might not be exactly 50, it might be 40% more, but that's still amazing. That's 40% growth in a year is insane. Like that would be a massive improvement. Like everybody just pull out your calculator apps that aren't on your iPads and let's round down actually. Let's just assume they do let's assume they do 1.8 million. Here, you can follow along with me. They do 1.8. Why aren't there commas in this app? 1.8 million vehicles this year. And then we're going to times that by 1.4 to see what 40% growth would look like. So let's say 2024, they build 2.5 million. 2025, they build uh 3.5 million. 2026, they build almost 5 million. 2027, they build almost 7 million. 2028, they build nearly 10 million. 2029, they build, holy crap, 13.5 million. And then by 2030, they're building almost 19 million vehicles a year. If they just maintain 40% growth, which is still less than their original target of 50%, they're still basically achieving their goal. Okay, it's not 20 million like they said it was going to be, but still, that's an amazing feat of engineering if you could build 19 million profitable EVs a year by 2030. 2030 is not that far from now. Like that's incredible. Like uh that's 7 years from now. Honestly, less actually because we're near the end of 2023. So 2030 is only like 6.5 years away. 6 years ago, guess what happened? The Roadster came out. They unveiled the updated Roadster 6 years ago. So if you think that wasn't that long ago, then 6 years from now is honestly not that far away. And if 6 years from now they just maintain 40% growth, that's still incredible. Which is my way of saying that even if Tesla just does 30% growth every year from here on out, that's still amazing. That's still great growth. So while yeah, they probably promised maybe too ambitious of a production target, I still think it's an amazing thing. Um, am I getting the iPhone 15? I will review one on launch day for my tech channel, but this is the wrong place to talk about it. Do I think the Rivian R1S is stealing a lot of sales from the Model X? Maybe, but I don't know. I feel like they're kind of fundamentally different. The Model X is more of a I don't know. It's a it's a Tesla. That's the only way I know how to encompass it. It's got the Falcon Wing doors. It's a bit fancier looking. It's more aerodynamic. The R1S is more of a off-roading style adventure vehicle. Also, the Model X I think is cheaper. Oh yeah, it's definitely cheaper because it qualifies for the federal tax credit. Only the LFP R1S I think will qualify. Well, actually, I don't know. It depends where they're getting their LFP battery packs from. I don't think they've started deliveries yet on the dual motor R1S. So it's kind of too soon to say because the production backlog for the R1S is still pretty long. There's still a bunch of people that are waiting on their R1S. Whereas the Model X is the exact opposite. They got tons of them. They're building them at very high volume, and they'll sell every one they have. And there's probably a bunch of them in inventory. You could probably go to a Tesla center right now and buy a Model X on the spot. But yeah, I don't know. I know they're both like 7-seater SUV type vehicles, but the Model X is not much for off-roading. It's not really meant for being a camper vehicle. It's more of just a premium EV. It's more interesting. It's more captivating if you're into self-driving, supercharging, and having a fancy car. Whereas the R1S it's fancy, don't get me wrong, and it's a nice vehicle, but it's very premium on the inside, but it's definitely got less emphasis on charging. It's not as good at charging as the Tesla. It's not as aerodynamic. It's not as efficient. You don't get as good a range unless you opt for the larger battery pack. But it's still going to cost more to charge it because it's less efficient. So how have your white seats held up? Mine have a very slight mark from jeans I've been wearing, but I cleaned it and it's not that bad anymore. Yeah, couldn't be happier with the white seats. They've aged beautifully. I have very little complaints with them. Um, yeah, they don't collect that much dirt. It's usually the first thing someone comments on when I show them the car. They're usually like, "Oh my God, look at these white seats. How do you keep them clean?" And I'm like, I really don't do much to them. What gets dirty in this car is the black plastic along the floor, because that's where your shoes get dirty and track dirt in. It's the floor mats, it's the black plastic. That stuff gets really dirty. The white seats, no, not really. How much money do I think they're losing on the R1S? I haven't done a deep dive on their earnings documents, but I think like could be. According to Tesla, it's like a 100% loss. So if they sell you the R1S for 80,000, they probably lost 80,000 on it, which is not great. Rivian is a lot of things that I admire, but they are not profitable yet. And I don't think they'll be profitable for a while. I'm pretty sure Rivian's plan is to establish a brand and build an audience and create desirability with the R1T and R1S. But I don't think the R1T and R1S are ever really intended to be profitable. I think their whole business strategy is to build a brand and get people comfortable with the idea of a Rivian and say, okay, yeah, this is a real company with real revenue, not profit, but revenue, and real deliveries and real manufacturing, and then build a brand, build hype around that, And then the R2 platform that they keep talking about, that's going to be their profitable vehicle. That's Rivian's Model 3. And the R1T and R1S are like their Model S and X, which Tesla was really not too profitable on. Um, what do I think of the speaker integration blind spot indicator on the Model 3 Plus? Yeah, it's great. It looks fine. I like that. I've driven cars with blind spot indicators. They're kind of nifty. They're kind of handy. I don't need them. I didn't wasn't like a deal breaker to me that the Tesla didn't have one, but it's a fine thing to have. I know a lot of people want them, and I'm sure people will appreciate it on the 3. And the the location they put it in, which is where the speaker is that makes sense. That's a convenient place. It's near the mirrors, so yeah, it was a good call. Um, Clay says, "How am I live streaming right now?" Well, I'm in my car and I've got a MacBook Pro and I'm using. You can see the shadow here. I've got my iPhone as my webcam, and this is. I'm reminding myself why I usually don't live stream in the evening. It's because the sun is usually blasting me like it is right now. Brandon said, "Lucid or Rivian bankrupt first?" Definitely Lucid. Rivian has a ton of investment. They actually have a ton more revenue. Um, and Rivian just has a ton of cash in the bank. So they're burning through money, but they can afford to. They can sustain this cash burn for many, many years. Lucid does not have that much cash in the bank. They've started liquidating their own stock. Um, and they have way less demand than Rivian has. People don't want to buy the Lucid vehicles. And Lucid is about to start trying to hype up their new Project Gravity SUV, and the demand for that I don't think is going to be very good, and it's going to be very expensive to try to mass produce, and ramping up a vehicle into production is one of the most expensive times for a startup, and they're already not profitable with their sedan, so they're going to just start burning even more cash, and they have even less money on hand than Rivian does. So the only way Lucid survives is if the Saudis artificially keep them afloat. At this point, they cannot be kept afloat by their own skills. They can't keep the company afloat just by selling cars, and I don't even think they can do much with manufacturing to lower their costs anymore. Um, let's see. Sorry, I know Jacob said something about that earlier. He said Lucid has some good efficiency because their motors tech is actually kind of crazy. Half the size of a plaid motor, but around 40% more power. If Lucid goes under, Tesla should just buy them. No, I don't think they need to. I think anything Lucid comes up with, Tesla could probably design in-house for cheaper. I do believe that the Lucid powertrain is far more efficient and way smaller, but I also believe that it's far more expensive to build, which is probably why Tesla hasn't made something that can rival it. It's like, okay, that's great that you can make a really powerful small powertrain, but if it costs way more than you can afford to sell it for, then it's pointless. Um, Lucid has a demand problem. They have a product problem. They have a profitability problem. Rivian has some of those problems, but I don't think Rivian doesn't have a demand problem, and Rivian doesn't have a cash problem. They've got a ton of money. Um, Lucid has a quarter of the cash as Rivian. Wow, that really puts it in perspective. Did Rivian have a plan for how long they'd stay in the red? I just wonder how long they can last. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you listen to the earnings calls and you read their reports, they've said for a while now. It's not really a secret. I'm not speculating much. They've said for a while the plan is to build a brand, establish an audience with the R1T and R1S, and then make a more profitable vehicle with the R2, which they've been working on for a while, and they plan on ramping that at their Georgia facility. So they're going to take everything they learned from the R1T and R1S and apply that towards the R2, um, which I believe they have enough cash in the bank to keep burning through money until they start selling the R2. I think they'll make it personally. If there's any, for one, I don't consider Tesla an EV startup, but if any EV startup has a chance at surviving and making it long term, it's Rivian. They've got all the cash, they've got all the demand, they've got the great products. People love Rivians. I love Rivians still. Um, they're just obviously any startup company, including Tesla, burned through a lot of cash in their early days as well. But um, Benjamin says, I've been told that the Cybertruck is the most pre-ordered product ever. Is this true? Uh, Maybe the most pre-ordered car ever, but it definitely doesn't get it. The Cybertruck hasn't gotten more pre-orders than like an iPhone or something. You know, a cheaper, smaller electronics device gets way more pre-orders than a vehicle. You know, We don't have concrete data on how many reservations there are for the Cybertruck. All we have is like crowd-funded, crowdsourced data. And the crowdsourced data, which could be inaccurate for the record, it might not be entirely accurate. So you got to assume for some margin of error here. But the crowdsourced data has suggested that there's between 1.5 million to 2 million reservations for the Cybertruck, whereas iPhone pre-orders are usually in the 5 million, 6 million, maybe 10 million, depending on how big of an iPhone release it is. So I don't think it's the most pre-ordered product ever, but it probably is one of the most pre-ordered vehicles of all time. That I could believe. Um, let's see. I've been told. Oh, sorry, I read that. Most products don't pre-sale for 4 years, though. That's true. So that kind of gives the Cybertruck a advantage over any other product, is that you can pre-order it for 4 years. What do I say to my friends who say Tesla uses unethical mining practices? I would tell them that their phones probably have more cobalt in them than most Tesla battery packs. I mean, Tesla has third-party audits. They have people make sure that they're sourcing their materials from the right places. But honestly, I know people like that. The people I've talked to that say, oh, your Tesla has minerals in it that was mined by children in the Congo. Usually those people aren't looking for answers. They're looking for excuses. It's not that they really care that much, because if you told that person that there's cobalt in their smartphone, do you think they're going to stop using their smartphone? No. It's too convenient for them. It's too helpful. They're not going to stop using their phone even if you tell them that, which is the truth. Um, what they're looking for is, they're annoyed with all of the hype. They see everybody getting excited about EVs, and they hear about government mandates and everyone pushing for EVs, and they're looking for an easy out, because it's expensive and it's different, and they don't want to learn about all the voltages and charging and the kilowatts and having to figure out how to charge a car from home. People just inherently don't like change. People don't like having to relearn things. So when there's a new idea, they will quickly grasp on to something that kind of makes the idea seem bad. They will cling on to, oh, you know what? Actually, all EVs are really stupid because they use these unethical mining practices. Um, they're not really looking for the truth, because if you do any bit of research, you'll figure out that that's not usually the case for the vast majority of the minerals in EV battery packs, and that there's all kinds of issues with gas vehicles, with their supply chain. In order to get gasoline in your car, you have to send oil to an oil refinery. Guess what they use in the oil refining process? It's cobalt. It's the exact same element that people are all complaining that EV battery packs use. So, and that has to continue getting used. They have to keep mining cobalt to send to the refinery, whereas the cobalt in an EV battery pack is mined once, and then at the end of the EV's life, they can recycle that battery pack and get the cobalt back out of it. It can be recycled again. They don't have to throw out the whole battery pack or something. So, yeah, like Jackson said, they're usually looking for a fight. They're usually looking for a reason to get out of it. So in my experience, when people tell me that, I don't argue too much. I'm just like, those battery packs got tons of bad materials in them. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's terrible. I don't resist. I actually have more to benefit from Tesla weakening demand, because then they will lower their prices more. And they have to make more competitive offerings. That's the whole reason we got Highland, by the way. You guys like Project Highland? Were you excited by that? The ambient lighting, the ventilated seats, the new taillight design, the new headlight design, all that stuff. It's fun and exciting, but you know why they did it? It's because the demand for the Model 3 was weakening. They're not adding ambient lighting to save money. They're not adding ventilated seats because it's cheaper. They're adding all those things because the demand wasn't as good as it used to be. So they had to increase the desirability. I want companies to do that. I want companies to increase the desirability. That means make the product better. I lived through the time where Tesla had basically infinite demand, where they had tons of orders coming in. They were removing things. They were taking out sensors, taking out features, raising prices, getting rid of the mobile connector, getting rid of standard connectivity. Tesla just kept removing, and raising prices. That's what happens when you have infinite demand. It's not that fun. I don't enjoy that. It's not that fun when Tesla just says, what can we take out? What can we remove? And how do we raise the price further? How do we keep increasing the prices? That's what happens if everybody is on board with EVs. If 100% of people all say, you know what, EVs are the future, I don't want to buy a gas car, that's what's going to happen. Tesla's going to remove more and more things and raise prices. I don't want that to happen. We are actually banking and able to get more affordable EVs because of people's negligence and arrogance towards them. It's ironic, but it's the truth. If everybody was on board with EVs, then the prices would just be way higher, because Tesla couldn't keep up with the demand, so they would have to raise the prices. And Tesla would be a lot more rich as a company, sure, but I wouldn't be able to afford an EV. So, um, Burkhardt says I want Highland to be my first car. That would be amazing. That's an incredible first vehicle. How is it still daylight where you are right now? Well, I am in a Pacific time zone, and in the Pacific time zone, the sun is still up. I don't know where you are, but um, what do I prefer, the Fisker Ocean or the Rivian? I haven't done much research into the Fisker. Nothing about the Fisker Ocean looks particularly interesting to me. I kind of like that they have some solar panels on it because I'm a fan of solar on EVs, but other than that, it just kind of looks like a boring. There's so many SUV crossover vehicles on the market. I can't get excited for them. I just there's too many of them. Like everybody wants them, and so everybody makes them, and they all do the same thing. It's like, oh, there's a display, but still some buttons, and they have a hatchback. Wow, do I have to watch another video of a guy opening up a hatchback? Look how much room there is back here. I don't care. That stuff's not as interesting to me. I like more game-changing, innovative EVs, like the Aptera, like the Cybertruck. That's more my alley. Like let's try to radically rethink vehicle design so that we can unlock something that wasn't potentially possible, rather than just take existing designs. I'm sorry, the Rivian R1S is beautiful. I love it, but it's not that different from three-row SUVs we've had for the past 10, 20 years. And I get why people like that because it works and for them they're comfortable with it. Makes the EV transition easier for them, but there's just so many people all buying the same thing and all talking about the same thing. It doesn't interest me as much. So I don't have very confident opinions on either. Like sure, I could live with the Ocean or the Fisker Ocean. I could live with that or the R1S. They're great vehicles. They're very practical and stuff, but they don't scream efficiency as much as I would like. I'm more of an efficiency guy. Did I see that Faraday Future delivered their first vehicle? Yeah, but I think they delivered it to like a big investor in the company, and Faraday Future's cars are all like $300,000, which when a car costs that much, I don't even really count it as a car. It's like, okay, it's a very expensive toy, but Lucid should remove Peter Rawlinson as CEO. I don't even know if Peter's really the problem. I know they pay him a lot, but I think there's a more fundamental company direction problem. I don't think it's necessarily just Peter's fault, but yeah, maybe they just need a new CEO to man the company and figure out how to make it profitable. Um, let's see. Highland Model 3 is a dream first car for millions. Oh yeah, I'm sure a lot of people want it. Jackson says, I heard about Juniper, but didn't they say 2024? I could be completely wrong, but I just can't see that. I wouldn't be shocked if maybe Giga Shanghai is ready for Juniper at the end of 2024. Maybe around this time next year, Giga Shanghai can build Project Juniper because that factory is, to be frank, it's the best one. They got it up super fast. It ramped up vehicle production faster than any other Gigafactory. They can roll out upgrades and improve the vehicle faster than any other Gigafactory can. That's why China and Europe and everything has gotten Highland and the US hasn't, is because of how fast Giga Shanghai can implement new features and new perks and stuff. Um, so I don't think Project Juniper will just be a across the board, like all the Model Ys get it at the same time, similar to what we're seeing with the Highland. It'll probably launch at Giga Shanghai first, but because a lot of the Model Ys in Europe are coming from Giga Berlin, they might not bring it to Europe. It might just be exclusive to the countries that Giga Shanghai is prioritizing, like Australia, China, um, Korea, Japan, those kinds of places. Um, uh, Tesla has let me down. I bought a Model S Plaid for $135,000. I put $15,000 down, and I have a loan of 102. Oh my God. Through Tesla credit, the trade-in value is 61,000. Can't refinance because I'm so underwater. I mean, I don't think Tesla's let you down personally, but yeah, I agree with what they said. That's the market's fault. That's um, trade-in value is never good because trading in a car means that they have to resell it again, so they're not going to give you a good price. Um, but personally, I don't recommend car loans. I don't care what the situation is. I don't think it's a good idea. I did not get a loan on my car. I'm all in favor of if you need a if you need a vehicle and you don't have the money for it, then buy the cheapest used gas car you can to hold you over until you have the money to buy the real vehicle you want, which is what we did. I drove around our old gas Sonata that cost 3 grand for years and years and years, and it was full of problems, and I didn't love the car, but it drove me around and let me save money while I was waiting for the Model 3 I wanted to come out. So, um, that's a horrible financial situation, but I don't think it's Tesla's fault. Let's see. Someone asked earlier. Um, Benjamin Sanders says, "What are Tesla's largest risks to success?" It's a good question. Probably getting government approval on certain gigafactories, I think, is their biggest limit. I don't think they're really. I still think they've got more demand levers they can pull. They haven't really run out of demand, in my opinion. The federal tax credit should even get a bit more interesting next year when it becomes a point of sale rebate, so that should improve affordability. Um, Tesla's got a ton of cash in the bank. So even if demand got really, really bad for Tesla, it isn't, honestly. They're still selling really well. But if Tesla did get really, really low demand, they could price their vehicles even lower than what they are right now. And they could go back to burning money, which wouldn't be good for the stock price, wouldn't be good for the PR. But they could afford to go back to burning cash and probably stay that way for a long time because of how big their cash pile is. Um, so if they really wanted to, they could just go back to selling vehicles at a loss, which honestly I think would make them very cheap. Because Model 3s and Ys are so cheap to build compared to any other EV on the market. Like I think they could probably price this Model 3, the LFP one, at like 35, maybe 33,000 and break even. And if demand was a problem, they could price it at 30K and try to hope they make it back through other means, through software services or charging or whatever. But personally, this is why I'm a Tesla stockholder, is because I don't think there's that many threats. I don't think there's that many risks at this point. They've got government help supporting electrification. They've got great products that they're ramping up production of and increasing the desirability of. Um, Also, if they had a demand problem, that would give them an excuse to update the assembly lines. I genuinely think Project Juniper would come faster if sales started to flatline. If less and less people were buying it, then you can argue, okay, we're not going to lose much money by shutting down the assembly line for a while and updating the factory. Because if you get to the point where demand slumps down and you're building more cars than you're selling, then it's actually a liability to keep building the car. Whereas if you have a high demand vehicle and lots of people are buying it, then you're going to be losing out on money by stopping production and updating the factory. Um, so in my head, if demand slumped, they could make the product better. They could fix things and update things and increase the desirability. There's not much I could see threatening Tesla. Um, it's like buying a house in 2022 as well, just awful timing. Well, I'm no real estate expert, but personally, I feel like everyone always feels like the real estate market is terrible. I mean, yeah, the interest rates are pretty high. They're much higher than they used to be, but if you look at the average for interest rates over the past 30 years, they're still actually pretty low for real estate. Now the prices have gone up still, but um pretty much any time you're in the market for a house, it feels like a bad time because the prices for real estate almost always are going up. So when that's the case, you'll always feel like the market is terrible. But then a few years go by and you see the market get even worse, and then you go, oh, okay, actually, it wasn't so bad. That's basically what happened to us. We bought our house in 2019, and the prices basically had never been higher because, of course, the real estate market is very steadily always increasing. And we were looking around at houses, and we were just like, oh my gosh, everything is so expensive. And, you see the the estimate of the price on Zillow and everything on the houses you're looking at, and you're like, oh my God, this house was so much cheaper a few years ago. Oh my God, the real estate market is crazy right now. I can't believe it. And we bought it for what we thought was a decent price, but it still felt like a lot at the time. And then a few years go by, and now we look at the market and we're like, oh my God, I feel so much better about our house price now. When we bought it, it didn't feel like that much of a steal. But now looking back at it, it feels like, oh, wow, that was an amazing bargain. I'm like, oh, I'm so glad we bought when we did, because if we were buying today, it would be so much harder. Um, your interest rate was great. Good for you, Chelsea. I'm glad you got a good interest rate. The biggest risk is the fall of the US dollar if oil demand, falls too fast before Dogecoin and Bitcoin go mainstream. Sorry, I laugh because I just can't visualize crypto going mainstream. Um, as a rule, you're not supposed to buy expensive cars unless you're a millionaire. I mean, I don't think I said that, but I definitely would not have bought a. I would never recommend to anyone under any circumstances buy a $130,000 car with a $15,000 down payment. That's just the interest rates, the time amount of money you'd have to spend on borrowing is just not a good idea. Um, let's see. It's like, oh, that's from a Canadian perspective. We got a housing crisis at the moment. Yeah, it's not great in the U.S. To be fair either. I know people trying to sell their houses and they're having a hard time. But um, my point is, the real estate market usually always looks like it's in its worst form, and then a few years go by, and then you're like, oh, okay, it wasn't as bad as I thought. Do I think Model 3 Highland sales will cannibalize Model Y sales, or do I think the Model Y will still be the Tesla's biggest seller regardless? I still think the Model Y will be the biggest seller, but it's mostly, I think, going to be because of production capacity. But also, yeah, because of demand. Inherently, just more people buy hatchbacks. As cool as the Model 3 Highland is, a lot of people will simply not buy it because it's a sedan and because it doesn't have a hatchback. That's just the way the US buyer is, I guess. So there's still a bunch of people that I think will buy the Model Y because they want a taller vehicle and they want the hatchback. And I also think if the demand for I do think the demand for Highland will be pretty high in the US. A lot of people are going to want that car, but because of that, in the lower production capacity, because they're only building them at Fremont and it's going to take time to ramp up with the new design and everything, um, the prices will probably go up. And I think I heard someone tell me in other countries, maybe in Europe, that the Highland Model 3 is already in some places close to the same price as the Model Y or more expensive than the Model Y. In fact, in the US, I would not be surprised at all if because of the higher demand for it, the Model 3 ends up costing more than the Model Y. And if that's the case, why would it cannibalize it? The Model Y could become the cheapest Tesla. I don't see why it shouldn't. It has all the latest and greatest manufacturing techniques. It's got the single piece castings. It's got the highest production capacity. GigaTexas is mostly just cranking out Model Ys. Fremont is also cranking out Model Ys. So you've got the most amount of supply, which means usually when there's more supply, you can lower prices. You can sell each one at a lower margin. So I don't think the Model 3 will outsell the Model Y simply because it's a sedan and because Tesla doesn't have the production capacity for it. But I do think cannibalize isn't the right word, but it could Osborne the Model Y a bit. I do think it could lower demand for the Model Y because everybody's going to know in the back of their head, hey, the Model 3 got this big refresh. The Model Y has got to get that big refresh eventually. So I'm not going to buy a Model Y until it gets the big refresh. So it could indirectly start to Osborne the Model Y, where a bunch of people still want the Tesla. They're not planning on buying anything else. They definitely want to buy a Tesla, but they're going to wait until Tesla updates the factory line with Project Juniper. The longer it takes for Tesla to introduce a new model, the higher the chances of new technologies being implemented. That's true. Yeah. Brandon says, I'm selling my 2019 Model 3 long range to Carvana this weekend for $28,000. It's 41,000 miles. Should I keep the mobile charger? That's a good question. Are you getting another Tesla? I don't know. The fact that Tesla dropped the prices to where you can now get an identical car for $86,000 doesn't help. It sucks. They lied about the ceramic brakes, though, never available. I thought they sold that as a kit later, but I don't know. The resale value of a car is always going to go down. And Tesla, it's not like they lowered the price for no reason. Tesla has always done this, by the way. They price vehicles based on supply and demand. So you bought a vehicle when supply was low and demand was high. And in my opinion, you should have been aware that as time went on, the supply would grow and the demand would weaken. That's inevitable. That happens with all of Tesla's vehicles. So when you buy a vehicle at the start of the refresh, it's going to cost more than down the road as they catch up with the orders. They can lower prices. Like, I don't think it would have made sense for Tesla to just keep prices high just so that you feel comfortable about your purchase. But that means that no one else can buy the car. To me, that's kind of like gatekeeping. It's like, I want Tesla to lower the prices until I buy one. And then when I buy one, I want them to raise all their prices so that no one else can afford one, so that my resale value is preserved. Like, it's just, I get it would be nice for you, but it doesn't really translate to how reality works. Like, it's just objective. As demand grows, supply will as demand decreases with increasing supply, the prices will go down. And I try to warn people about that, but I've definitely never told anybody to get a Tesla loan. Um, Remember when you bought a 32-inch flat screen TV for $1,000? I didn't, but yeah, I knew people that did that. Um, I'm sorry for your situation. It doesn't sound fun, and I apologize for that. I hope you can get through it. I wish you all the best, but I frankly I don't think it's Tesla's fault. I think it's reasonable to lower prices as demand weakens. Um, Jackson says, I'm not too knowledgeable about Tesla pre 2021, but there was a time where different colors were a thing. I know Randy has his matte wrap, but man, I would love to see a finish like that on the Ioniq 6. Yeah, I mean, it's a decent way to increase demand, but I don't think it's sorry, yeah, you asked about this. I didn't answer it earlier. Sorry, Jackson. You asked are there any colors you'd like to see on Teslas? I love Quicksilver. I hope they bring Quicksilver to the US, but yeah, it's a little bit of a demand lever if they ever feel like trying to incentivize more people to buy, but I don't think it's usually a deal maker. Like Highland, I think is much more of a deal maker as a refresh. Like a bunch of people are going to now buy that because the interior and exterior got so much better. But paint colors are kind of like ooh, that's nice. But I don't think it's like, oh my God, that color is so cool. I'm going to go out and buy one. So that's probably why Tesla doesn't put a huge emphasis on it. Um, you hear about that guy who had big cracks in the Model Y GigaCast frame? I did not, but I did just watch a big Sandy Monroe video explaining how much more rigid and durable the GigaCasting is than the old-fashioned welding design. Um, Tesla is already killing their competition, but which feature is added would be the final blow for most brands? I don't think there's one feature that they could add. Maybe CarPlay, but no, it's like there's a lot of people that just don't like Teslas for the design. They just don't like the overly simplistic interiors, all of the minimalism. Um, some people don't like the exterior. Some people don't like the build quality. I don't think there's like one thing Tesla could add that would kill off the competition. Some people are just very loyal to other brands. Some people are just diehard Ford fans or diehard GM fans, and some people just really, really love their Subarus or their Polestars, and it's not inherently because of some feature. They just like the way it looks. They like the color options, or they like the interior design, and some people like having more buttons and dials. That doesn't mean I think Tesla should add it because I like the fact that Tesla doesn't have a lot of buttons and dials. I prefer this interior design, and it's probably a lot cheaper for Tesla to build this simplistic interior. So I'm okay with options. Like I don't think Tesla needs to kill their competition. Like you look on the road today, there's so many different car brands that are all doing things slightly differently from each other, and those slight differences are enough to pull one person to one brand over the other. So I'm not like one of those Tesla hyper bulls that are under the belief that Tesla will make every other automaker go bankrupt. I don't believe that. I think that Tesla will probably be the biggest automaker, but I still think there will be tons of other automakers to choose from long term. Um, let's see. When is the next tech stream? I did a member stream today. I might do another one tomorrow, but there will definitely be one Friday morning during the pre-order. Uh, I can afford the payment, fortunately, so no worries there. No repo. It just sucks knowing that it's in the back of my head. Cheers. Yeah, it's a sucky situation, but I just hope you can learn from it. I don't think it's Tesla's fault, but try not to put yourselves in that kind of debt. You know, it's not. There's good debt and there's bad debt, and car debt is never good. In my opinion, it makes sense to get debt on something that appreciates over time, and vehicles pretty much never appreciate with time. Don't listen to what Elon says. Do I have my front license plate on? I know many states are supposed to, but many Teslas don't put them on. No, I never got around to it. I had to get some kind of accessory to adhere it properly, and then I was talking to someone at some point that put their front license plate on their Tesla, and then someone ripped it off. So then they were like, "Well, what's the point? You know, to do all that work for it, and then they just take it off." Basically, where I live, yes, they do want you to put a front plate, but it's so common. Like one of every five cars on the road doesn't have the front plate on it. Like a cop doesn't care. They don't do anything. I know Randy lived in San Diego for many years, and he never put the front plate on, and never came up, never caused any problems. And he was in a car accident. You know, there were police there and saw his car and everything. It's not like they go, Cybertruck delivery event this month and Tesla taxi revealed during it? No, you guys are getting your hopes way, way too high. I do not think they are going to unveil a robotaxi at the delivery event. Um, Oh, dinner's ready, guys. I got to wrap up. Um, Everyone always does this. Every Tesla event, they're like, and they're going to do one more thing, and they're going to do one more thing, and they'll also do this, and also do this. It's going to be the biggest event of all time. It never happens. Every single event, everyone's like expecting way too much. Um, expect less than what we think. Like, yes, I think we'll get a Cybertruck delivery event. Probably not this month, but maybe November, maybe December. But at that event, I don't expect it to be that insightful. Like, they probably won't talk about the range, they probably won't talk about the weight or the pricing. They'll just give some over to employees and call it a day. Um, Lower expectations, don't raise them. What's the situation with the next gen Roadster? The latest news is they'll build it next year, but they've been saying that for 6 years now, so I don't trust them. But thank you. I don't know what's for dinner. I'm about to find out. But thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you watching. I love doing these live streams. You guys always ask great questions. Um, the semi and the Roadster was a great event, but they still haven't delivered the Roadster, which I think, if anything, has taught Tesla not to reveal things prematurely. So they definitely won't reveal the Robotaxi prematurely. Um, I hope they cancel the Roadster, but if they do, they definitely are going to have to refund all of the people who reserved one. So if they're not refunding people, they haven't canceled it yet. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye bye.